This episode is brought to you by Santos Threads. Make sure to visit Santos-Threads for the latest and greatest in men's and women's Latino urban-inspired streetwear. Visit SANTOS-THREADS.com. Hey, you are now listening to the Santos Says Podcast, episode number 28. Once more, thank you all for listening and supporting as we wrap up this year very soon, 2021. Thank you guys all for being a part of this. I'm very, very happy, excited to be with you guys. Episode number 28, the Santos Says Podcast. Back at you once again. I have a special guest today. But first, before I get to that, make sure you guys follow me on social media, Santos Thread Shop at Instagram, as well as Santos Thread Shop on TikTok. Working on the TikTok, trying to anyway, but being consistent with the social media, just trying to continue to build and grow. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys who listen when I drop these episodes and who interact with me on the social media platforms. I really appreciate it. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, the Santos Says Podcast, and of course, in the audio format on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and Stitcher. Also available on Google. I don't plug it, but I'm on Google. If you search on Google, the Santos Says Podcast, you can definitely find me as well. So, episode number 28. Here we go. On this episode, I will have a special guest joining me. This person is what I would call a great example for the youth. Somebody who is very much is an educator. Someone who is, her life work is the future, the children, educating the children, especially from the inner city. And I will have the pleasure of being joined by someone who is someone who I learned from I learned about, I should say, through a friend. Shout out to Mozo, Jose Cruz, one of my friends and one of the colleagues who I've been on his show, and he's been on my show. So a really good person. And so someone I met through him. And basically, her name is Sandra Polanco. So Sandra Polanco will join me. And she's an educator. She's somebody who has dedicated her whole life work to education. And what I wanted to talk about with her is we're going to talk about, this episode is going to be about education in the inner city and really with minorities, the state of mind with education. Okay. And I'm going to talk about her, get her experiences. And I want to also touch base with her as far as we'll get some of her background, her story, how that played a factor into her life, right? And into her career. But one of the things I really wanted to do was also talk about some of the expectation levels of education within the inner city, because, all you hear on the news is how inner city schools are failing and how the bar needs to be raised for inner city students, minority students in particular, who are from these inner cities, the neighborhoods that a lot of us come from. So I want to talk with her just to get a perspective from her. She's an assistant director of the freshman experience at Monroe College in the Bronx, has been around education a good part of her life, and really has a great perspective. And I want to hear from her as a Latina female, someone who's an educator, someone who's around young individuals all the time, and really just understanding some of the dynamics, because let's be honest, okay? One of the inspirations for this episode was really based on a lot of my own experiences that I've had, right? Having grown up in the inner city, seeing a lot of the challenges that come with that, some of the obstacles, and oftentimes we feel like we're stuck in the circumstances that we come from, right? We come from a certain neighborhood, we come from a background, we come from not having a lot, and sometimes we feel like we're stuck there, like there's no hope in sight, right? And that's not always the case. It doesn't have to be the case. I always say, like, if you're dealt a bad hand, and when you're dealt a bad hand and you're starting out from a vantage point of, quite frankly, a disadvantage, you have to make the best of those situations. It may not be as easy for us coming from those situations, but you don't have to stay there. Where you start at does not have to be where you end at. That should not be your motivation. Should not be to just stay there. You should always want to grow and continue to push your generations and families forward to get to different heights, not just economically, but also state of mind as far as the standard, etc. So she will be joining me momentarily, and I just want to talk about some of those things with her, with Sandra Polanco, and I think her perspective is really interesting, considering how she spent a good part of her professional life working with different youth and having those experiences. Her now working at a college and having that perspective. So, switching it up, doing something a little different. If nothing else, I really want to hear, I want her story to be out there, and I want her to share her story, talk to us about her experiences. And if nothing else, if it could be some sort of a spark or an inspiration for others, that would be the goal. And so that's what I want. I want people to that's a part of what this show is about. Aside from the hip hop, we do the hip hop. We talk about different things with hip hop and the culture, but Latino entrepreneurs, so on and so forth. But one of the other things I always wanted to do is really have people tell their stories. And that's what this is all about, really being able to share stories from other individuals and really come together and create that sense of community. So without further delay, I do have her here. She's here backstage, and I will be welcoming to the show. Everyone, please welcome. She is an assistant director of the freshman experience at Monroe College. She's an educator. She's all about the education, about the youth, and here to share her story and really talk to her today. I want to welcome to the show Sandra Polanco.
Thank you, Santos. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Likewise, glad to have you. Thank you. So, listen, I appreciate you coming on. First of all, thank you for coming on, and it's a great it's great to have you, because a lot of times people go, oh well, people associate me as being the guy who interviews rappers and stuff all the time, and I do interview rappers, right? But I do like to have, my thing is also having people such as yourself that have stories to tell. So that was part of really me having you on here, and part of the rationale, if you will, to have you on the show to join me. So thank you for that. And we'll get into it, right? Tell us about your story. I know we talked a little bit about this offline, but I want to know your story, because having seen you in social media, obviously, you're very positive. You're a positive person. You like to have positive messaging. Talk to me, talk to the audience about your background and where you come from.
Absolutely. So I'm from the Bronx, born and raised in the Bronx, only child. So growing up, it was just myself and my parents. My parents came here from Puerto Rico, super hard workers, your typical story, came here to make it, right, quote unquote. And so I was very fortunate, because they really put their all into the only child that they had, which was me. And so what they wanted was for me to get a good education, right? Growing up on the Grand Concourse, as I said to you, was not always, there was no green grass there. There was no, flowers blooming. I don't remember really seeing anything like that. And so they knew that the ticket for me was to get a good education, a solid education. And so what they did was they worked to put me in a great school, Catholic school, private school. I started kindergarten in a public school. I always say this joke, and the teacher at that time, she was upset because the class was talking. This kindergarten class was talking, like 5-year-olds do, and she decided to take dishwasher soap and put it in the mouths of every child so that we could be quiet. And when I got home and told this to my mother lost it. And I think this is where I learned to advocate for myself and advocate for my kids when you see that something is not right. And she said, you are never going back to that school because what that teacher did to you was not right and you didn't deserve that. And she homeschooled me. The remaining year, I always say joke because I said I was a kindergarten dropout, right? Because the remaining year she homeschooled me. I never went back to that school. And she said, I am going to work to put you in a private school so that you never have to go through something like that again. And that is what she did. She did not have many skills because she didn't graduate from high school. So she opened up in our apartment. She had like a little daycare business and she would take care of kids at home. And because that's what she knew how to do, right? She was a great mom. She knew how to multitask and organize and do all those mom things. And that's what she did. And that is how she was able to help pay for my tuition along with my father. And my entire life, they advocated for me. They made sure that I had the best that they could give me. And so me at that time, even without knowing what was happening, education was like in here. It was instilled in me. It was like, wow, if I go to school and I get a degree and I do this, I can have A, B, C, and D, right? I don't have to maybe struggle so much the way that I saw my parents struggle. And so it really stemmed from there. Them, without even knowing it, what they did to me was really incredible. What the gifts that they were able to provide me with, even from day one. And so fast forward to when I got to school, when I went to college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I didn't know what avenue I wanted to take. I loved writing. I was like a nerd. I love reading. I love writing. Like that was my thing. And I became an English major because it's what I knew. It's what I love to do. And so along the way, I picked up Spanish as a second major because I really was, I'm really good at English, but I want to learn more about the Spanish literature because I was never taught that. My parents didn't know about that. Like there was no Google at the time. Was there even internet? I don't know. I didn't know any of it. And so being able to focus on those two things really helped become who I am today. And so when I graduated college, I didn't know what to do. Like, what does one do with a English and Spanish major? I don't know, right? With the English and Spanish degree, right. I didn't know. And to make a long story short, I saw an opening for an admissions counselor position. I was now 21 years old, freshly college grad. And I said, I'm going to apply for this job. I think like this sounds kind of like something I can do, right? And I got the job. I had a big office. I'm interviewing students that are not that much younger than me to get into college. And that's really how my career in higher education took a kickoff, right? I started doing that. And I was like, this is cool. Like, I like this. I'm helping my community. I'm helping students. I'm helping them get in. I'm helping them to see that they can speak to someone that looks like them and they could be here too, right? I'm not any different from them. And so that's really what started it all. My parents, me first having that opportunity to have that job in higher education was what then showed me what my passion was. Because for so long, I didn't know what my passion was. Like sometimes when we don't have an obvious passion, right? Like we're not artists, so we don't have great voices. We don't sing. We're like, wow, right. Such and such is so good at doing all of these things. And I'm not good at anything, right? So it was like I finally figured out what my passion was. And when I figured that out, I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get my master's degree. I'm going to get my master's degree in guidance counseling, in education. And by that time, I had already had my daughter. And I went to school and I earned my degree in something that I absolutely loved doing. And that is really a little bit of my path and of my journey as to how I came to be in the world of higher education.
And that's amazing. That's amazing because, like, I always say, like, our experiences really kind of like shape us, right? So we learn all these things, and so, like, seeing that experience, like you said, right? How the Latino, that's interesting with the Latino literature, because there are so many great writers that we don't learn about, that we never hear. They don't teach us this in school, and for obviously for different reasons, right? Where the education was not quite the emphasis always for some of our parents or grandparents. So it's like we have to discover this on our own, because right, and we're learning about all these different artisans and artists. And so you having that sense of wanting to go back and look this up and research that, I would assume, and this is what I was going to ask you, I would assume that your parents instilled a great deal of pride in your heritage and your roots. Talk to me about that and how that factored in you wanting to go back and research some of this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, growing up, first of all, my first language, Spanish. My parents did not speak to me in English, to the point that when I went to that private school in the first grade, I did not speak English, and I got in trouble for that. Like they were looking at my mother like, "What are we supposed to do with her here? She doesn't even speak English." And so my parents, it was all about the culture, all about the food, right? The music. Listening to, every Saturday, I'm waking up, my father is blasting Hector Lavoe and Willie Colon, and it's salsa all day long. And at that time, I'm like, wow, like again, like we're listening to this again, not knowing
Mm-hmm.
that years later it will be the only thing that I listen to. Like you don't even catch me listening to English music here. It's rare. It is very rare because everything that I listen, it's just in me. It's part of who I am. And when I went away to school, I think that's when I saw it the most. When I was up in upstate New York, I don't know. There are Puerto Ricans there now. There are Latinos, but at that time, I didn't really know where they were. And on the radio, there was no
Troy.
Spanish. Friends.
If you go to
Right.
Troy, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans in Troy,
Okay.
in
Okay.
Albany, but years ago, right?
Yeah, that was almost. Listen, I graduated college many, many years ago, so I didn't really see a lot of that, and I really missed my music. I missed my salsa. And I would go to the Wiz, and I would go to the record stores, and I would buy the CDs and listen to them in my Walkman, in my Discman, and that's when it all started coming together. I was like, wow, like I'm not home, and I'm really missing this music. This music is a part of me. And so I'm so thankful that I was exposed to that, and that although obviously when I went to the school I had to learn to speak English, it didn't take anything away from me because at home we still spoke Spanish, right? To this day, I call my mom, we're speaking in Spanish. We are eating all of the traditional foods. You know, my mom eats rice every single day. I mean, I don't eat rice every single day because the carbs, but carbs was like not a thing. It's not a thing in
No,
Latino households. It's like you
no,
don't have a meal without rice,
that's
right?
why
You
it
have
is.
a meal with rice. That the rice is like the main thing in the meal. And so having all of that be a part of me was really incredible, because when I am able now to go back to visit the island, I feel like I'm home, even though I have never lived there, right? I have lived here my entire life. I'm like, well, this is like my second home, because I don't feel any there. I don't feel like I'm going there and visiting. I feel like I'm a part, like that's a part of me. And that's really an incredible feeling to have, to be able to live here, but feel so connected to your culture.
I've always said, like, I identify with that as well, because I've always said, like, aunque yo no vivo en la isla vive en mí. So I say that all the time. So the translation, I don't live on the island, but the island lives in me. So
Exactly.
so I appreciate that too, definitely. since you mentioned the music, I wasn't even going to talk about music, but I think we should talk about it, right?
Okay, let's do
So,
it.
all right, since we're talking about culture and stuff, who are some of your favorite salseros? That you into salsa? Because I'm a big salsero myself. So,
I'm gonna say I love Willie Colon, like I mentioned before, Hector Lavoe, Eddie Santiago, Frankie Ruiz. I love Mark Anthony, um, Gilberto Santa Rosa. I mean, all of the greats. I feel like, do we have any new salseros out there? I don't know. I can't think of any.
it breaks my
Do we?
heart. No,
Yes.
no, no. You're not wrong. Okay, you're not wrong in that sense, in the sense of what salsa used to be. Um, you're not wrong. Like salsa was the thing, right? And there's still a segment of people who love the salsa, but I think as time has gone on, it can become more associated with people that are older. So like the youth, everything with the youth movement is the reggaeton, the trap music in Spanish, la música urbana, all that stuff, el dembow,
Yes.
all that.
Which I love too. I love it too. I do love it. But there's something about the instruments, right? Like just listening to the words of about salsa, and I feel the way that you feel. Like I can't remember the last time I heard a new song salsa that was like, wow, this is no. I feel like it's dying, but we're not gonna let it die. We're gonna continue to listen and support, even though they're old artists. We are not stopping.
I like to hear that. No, definitely. That's important too. And like, it's the same thing because I also grew up in a family that's very traditional also. Like, so like around this time of the year, like it was, música jíbara, aguinaldo, bomba y plena. Um, we grew up with all that stuff too. In my family, we come from that musical background too. So it's nice to hear that. And I think we have the responsibility um, to pass it on, right?
Yes. Absolutely. We have to make sure that our kids hear it, that they know these artists, and that when they get older, they're reminded of us listening to this, and wanting to learn more and continue to learn, and continue to pass those traditions on. Absolutely.
Yes, yes, no, definitely, and so like, I appreciated you saying that because it's a very important thing to me, and I feel like seeing other people such as yourself that also can identify with having that sentiment of saying, hey, we can't let this die, um, is refreshing to see that. Um, to be honest with you, so it's great to see that, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I know you mentioned it earlier, but
Mhm.
as far as the Bronx, right? So how did talk to me about that part as far as like how that formulated your ideas on education? Was there anything that inspired you over that time, or talk to me about that?
Yes. So like I did say before, I grew up on the Grand Concourse, 177th Street. During a time where there was a lot of crime. We're seeing that again now, unfortunately. But there were a lot of things going on during that time. I remember leaving school, walking home, and seeing the little crack vials on the street, right? And you're like, stepping over them. That's what it was. I remember being in my room, and you hear gunshot. Hearing a gunshot was not like a out of the norm thing. You just hear it, you duck down, and it was a part of what was happening every day. And so I know that for me, I was like, okay, I don't want to be like these people that I'm seeing around me. I don't want to be a negative statistic. I want to know that I'm going to do something, that I'm going to get an education, and I am going to have a job. I always wanted to have a job where I could dress up. Like I always loved dressing up, and I pictured myself in like a suit and heels. Like I would see these women on TV. I would see my teachers, right? My white teachers, um, come from, I don't even know where they came from, but they didn't live in the Bronx, and I was inspired by what they looked like, and I was inspired by the fact that they were able to teach us all these incredible things. And so I think it was the thought of I have to do something different, right? And also, my parents really doing their best to protect me from what was going on around me, because like I spoke to you offline, I must have had the strictest parents to ever exist. Okay, like I couldn't go out with anyone. I couldn't go downstairs to check the mail. It was that bad.
Really? Wow.
Yes. And not to say that that was the best way to go about it, because it was hard for me, but it was the only way that they knew how to protect me. And looking back, they worked with the resources that they have, and their resources were very limited. And so they felt like, oh, if they let me go out and hang out, with the girls from the building and on the block, yo me iba a dañar,
Hmm.
right? And so they didn't want that. So their thing for me was school, school, school. You're bored, go read a book. Go read a book. We didn't have cable. We didn't even have, it was like basic channels 246, Univision y Telemundo. That's all that I had. And my books. And honestly, my books and my reading really, you can see that from being a child and reading to I ended up majoring in English and Spanish, because my love for reading stemmed from being able to escape. It allowed me to be in my room where I had a view of the garbage, in buildings where they throw the garbage, like all the garbage bags are collected
Right,
there.
right.
That was my view. And
Like by the
so,
side of the building,
yes, in the back,
almost
exactly.
like it looked like an alley.
Exactly, an
Yeah.
alley. So that was my view. I would wake up and that was my view. And when I read books, I was able to go to so many other different places. I was able to see that green grass and read about how people lived that had houses and did really cool things, right? And traveled and went on vacation. And so reading for me was endless. I used to get my allowance money and money from Christmas and birthdays, and I used to buy books. That's what I used to do, because the books allowed me to just learn so much more about what was out there, things that I wasn't being exposed to, but things that I knew were out there, and I was going to conquer those things. And that is really what kept me going. It kept me going through difficult times. It kept me going through times where I didn't agree with my parents, because I was always able to see the bigger picture. I was always able to see that goal, which was here. I was like, okay, no, I'm going for that. I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna make my dreams come true. And that's what still keeps me going.
No, that's amazing because like so many times, right? Um, when you come from places that where we come from, when you come from the inner city, some of these neighborhoods, and when we're given, a lot of times we're given a bad hand, right? What we perceive as a bad hand, we may be coming up at a disadvantage, and so many times the state of mind is for us to just. It's easy to just stay there. It's easy to just stay from where we are and kind of like just agonize over it and say, hey, listen, I got given a bad hand. I'm stuck here. I'm stuck here. I'm stuck here. No, like there's so many great stories like that of yourself where we don't have to stay in the same place that we started. So I I want to know since that motivated you to do what you're doing and to get involved. Um, I guess like how have you seen? What has your experience been like with some of those students? Um, because I talk to me, but I know what you do offline, but just talk about what you do now and like how the experiences of the inner city with those kids. What is their mind state right now on education?
Sure. Absolutely. So my main role is to support freshman students who have just started college, to make sure that they have all the support that they need in order for them to have a successful first year, which will then, of course, lead to them hopefully graduating with their college degree. And so, with that, our population comes from where you and I came from, right? The majority, that's where they come from. And a
Right.
lot of them don't have supportive parents. A lot of them, maybe they don't want to be there. Maybe their parents made them go because they think that's the next best step, and they just were not good students and they don't want to be in school at all. And so my job is challenging because I have to get these kids to like what they're doing, to figure out the right path in life somehow, to get them excited, to get them motivated. And one of the things that I always tell them is, what are you good at, right? Like what I mentioned before about passion. And I think that doing something that you're passionate about is key. If I was doing accounting right now, working as an accountant, but getting paid a lot of money, I would be miserable because that's not, I hate numbers, I hate math. It's not
Mm-hmm.
me, it will never be me. So that's the first thing. You have to do something that you like. Some of them will just choose a major just because, oh, I didn't know what else to choose. Oh, my mother wanted me to do such and such. We cannot do that. This is one of the times where I tell parents, you have to let them pick what they want because they're not going to end up doing well. The other thing is, I do see a lack of motivation often. And I think it's because, the 18 to 21-year-old age group, we have a really tough time finding ourselves. I'm sure you remember when you were that age. It's like you think you have it all figured out. You really don't. You don't know anything at that age. You really
No,
don't.
no.
And so that's a really tough age to be in. And I think now, on top of just the pandemic and everything that we have gone through, everything that we are still going through, has been even more difficult. A lot of my students actually still take virtual classes because we offer both. And there have been times where I see students not liking into classes. I teach a class myself, and I will have to tell you that I'm teaching the class. I teach the class virtually, and I'm talking to myself because every box, the camera's off. They don't turn their cameras on. I call on
Wow.
them. I don't know if they're there or not. It's like I'm talking to myself. I'm asking questions and I'm answering them myself.
And no one is at, there's the participation. It's
The
not.
participation is
Yeah.
not there. But I realized in this past year that a lot of these students have problems that are so serious. They are struggling with anxiety. A lot of them are hungry. A lot of them don't have regular 3 meals, the way that you and I may have. So a lot of them are taking care of ill parents. A lot of them, the parents are working and they are the older siblings, so they have to leave class to go take their younger sibling to school and pick them up.
Wow.
So where in the beginning I was like, oh my God, what is wrong? You're not motivated. You don't want to do, you don't want to be successful. What are you doing? I started seeing that these real world problems were very serious, and this is what is still going on. And we as educators have to support them regardless of the situation, regardless of what is going on. So I make it a point to work with them. If a lot of them have to leave because they have to go to work, how can I tell a student you have to stay in my class because if that student has to work to help pay the rent and the con ed?
Right.
That's really what is going on. We are in a crisis right now, and I don't think that a lot of people realize that. That's just my perspective from the school that I'm in. I am sure that this is happening all throughout. And so we have created a pantry at the school to give, when they're hungry or they don't have food at home, they can take like pasta, rice. It has like a little bit of everything just to kind of help them out. um we are seeing depression is, and this is, again, this is across the board. This is not just, we're seeing anxiety, depression, feeling so low that you cannot even get out of bed. You're not going to think about going to class or taking a final if you can't even get out of bed. So it's really about talking about these issues, such as you have to go get help. You have to go speak to someone. I tell them all the time, if you're sick, your throat hurts, right? Your headache, you have a headache for the past couple of days. You're gonna go to the doctor. You have a pain in your neck. You're gonna go get that checked out. You're depressed. It is no different. You have to go and get help, or it's not gonna go away. And so it's about learning to fix those problems first before even getting to the academics and the education. Because that we could do. That's the easy part. We need to help them with all of these other things that are happening as well. And then, yes, there's another small portion that they're just unmotivated because they don't want to be there. That's a different group. So it's a mix. It's a lot of different things. What is going on? I think it's just important to take the time and talk to them and see what's happening. The majority of the time, they're not bad kids. They just need someone to lean on and to encourage them and motivate them and get them the right help that they need.
Yeah, it's so, you're so right. And I think a lot of times too, we underestimate how difficult that time period could be in our lives, right? Like I always say, for me personally, and I'm sure for you can relate and others as well. Like for me personally, that age range from like 18 to like 20 something, early 20s, 22, 21, 22. That was such a rough time. Like that was like one of the hardest times of my life because I was clueless. I didn't know what I was gonna do, right? And it could be very overwhelming when you're going through life almost like doing what you're expected to do, right? Expected to do. And but meanwhile, what you're supposed to do, but meanwhile, you have no idea how you're going to go about it and you don't know if you really want to do it, right? So
Right.
you may be taking a major that you don't want to take. You're just taking it because you're like, all right, well, I got to be close to home because I got to go to work at 2, right? I gotta go work my job at 2. I gotta pick up my little brother or sister at 12. I have to do this. I have to go to school here, whatever. And so many different circumstances exist. So it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. And I appreciate your perspective saying, hey, these people, some of these kids are just kind of, they need a little push. They need a little guidance because they have all these emotions, anxiety, depression, things that were frowned upon in the past. And I think now we've come a long way,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
In addressing those things, but we still have some work to do.
Yes, we definitely do because it's still, although it's gotten so much better, a lot of them still don't want to go get that help. A lot of them still feel ashamed to do that. And a lot of it has to do with the parents, because you might be an understanding parent and I might be one as well, but not everybody is that way. And if these parents still see that as so taboo, as so like it's shameful almost if you're trying to get some kind of help, then that's going to be portrayed onto the child also. And that's what we have to be careful. You never want to shame your child. If a student has, for example, some type of learning disability, which we see all the time, it is so common, but maybe they don't want to get the services that they need because they feel embarrassed by it. Don't feel embarrassed by getting a service that you need. So there's so much work that still has to be done. We've come a long way, but we're not there yet, for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think also one of the things, and I'll ask you, I'm going to ask you this question as well. But one of the things I notice is that just like as a whole, growing up, I feel like our mentality is always just to get by, right? So like we would have that mentality of just, oh, well, I just passed. I got a 65, or I just got a D, right? At least I'll pass. At least I passed and I didn't fail. And I feel like that comes from a lot of pain, a lot of frustration, a lot of not having much and just kind of like settling for just the bare minimum. Um, what are your thoughts on that? As far as like, because that bothered me. I knew from a young age when I would be around kids who had that mentality, that bothered me back then. I'm like, well, like part of me is thinking, okay, maybe I could just get by. And then the other part is like, wait a second, this is not right. I shouldn't just want to get by. I should excel. So what do you think about that? And what do you feel like we can do to change that?
Absolutely, that's an excellent point. And I wholeheartedly agree. There was nothing about me that just wanted to get by. Like, I knew I had to put in that work, and I wanted to do well, right? I wanted to excel. I wanted to be at the top. And not to say that I was always at the top. By no means was I always at the top. But getting by was not enough, because I would have been cheating myself if I just did the bare minimum to get by, right? And I think that unfortunately now we are seeing a lot of students that they just want to get by. A lot of them have, again, I'm speaking more from the perspective of a college student because that's my experience. A lot of them have, they do have jobs that they prioritize these jobs over their academics. So it's like, let me just give in this paper, at the last minute, because I have to go to work, right? Or they will do something different from what has been asked of them. I had a student the other day who said, Miss, I know I gave in a paper and I didn't do the APA format, and I failed the paper. Can you email my professor so that he can give me the opportunity to do it again? And I said, but why didn't you do it in the right format? And he was honest. He said he felt it was too hard and he didn't want to put in that work. And so it's not okay to think that we can just skimp on something in life and expect to have those rewards in the end. Because when you have that job, and this is what I always tell them, when you get to the workforce and you're asked to do a report or you're asked to submit something, you best believe you're gonna have to do it the right way
Mhm.
and be here with your game, because
How the
otherwise it's gonna
expectation.
out. Exactly. We're not going to just give in a one or two sentence report. That's not going to work in any workplace. And so I think for them this is the time to really start learning that. And I have those conversations with them, and I think that it's important to have those conversations as parents with our kids, because often parents are so quick to blame, their teachers and the school system and the Department of Education and this. No, and this doesn't start at the college level. This starts from day one. I have two kids, two teenagers myself. There's times where they want to do the minimum, believe me. Like, come over here. What is this paper that you just did?
Mhm.
Absolutely not. And yes, they're not going to be happy with me, but they're going to do that paper over, and they're going to know that next time that's going to be checked, and they're going to give it their all, because it starts in the home. I can speak to my students all I want or all day long. But if at home their parents are not teaming up with me and giving that same message, it's not going to happen. So it's really a collaborative effort. It's a team. I always say that, for kids, as parents, if you have small kids, be a part of a team with your child's teacher, and be a disciplinarian at home as well. Check your kids' grades, check their portals, check the I'm sure none of the kids want me saying this right now, but that's what I do at home. I check my kids' grades. I check, what do you have to do for the week, what exams do you have to do, because we are not going to just get by. We are going to plan, organize, and we are going to do our best. We don't have um that in us right now, that we're going to just get by and do just a little bit, and ends up who knows where. No, we're going to live our life with purpose, with intent. Our ancestors fought way too hard for us to be here now, just doing the minimum. And it's really, like I said, a team effort among everyone.
I appreciate hearing that. That really, that makes me happy to hear that, because you know what, that's we need people like that. We need to have that mentality, because it's a little disheartening when I see, I hear stereotypes, you know I hear stereotypes all the time, and it really bothers me that to hear those things, and in some cases it's things are true, right? In some cases we live these stereotypes when we shouldn't be, because we're not doing our best, we're not putting our best foot forward. And I think Latinos in general, like especially in the areas that we come from in the inner city, where there's still work to be done. And it's not a thing it's not a thing of me trying to, like, um I'm not talking down to anyone, obviously, or anything like that. What I'm saying is I just think there's work to be done. We have room to improve in that regard. And I think people such as yourself really go a long way in helping kind of like usher in that change that we need, for us to take, to take that next step. I think we need to do better with education as a group. I always felt that way. Um, Honestly.
Absolutely. And a lot of that is because our parents, like, it's like, how do you learn this, right? How do you learn this skill? A lot of parents don't know. They may not know. So it's almost like we can't blame them. But I have a lot of parents who will come to me and say, how can I help my child? And let me tell you, I will become best friends with that parent, because it's like, you want your child to do well. I will give you all the tricks. I will help you. Come see me and we will work on this together. And who benefits? The student benefits. And so it's really just about getting in there and doing everything that you can. It really does take a village. It
It does.
absolutely does.
100%. Now it's time for a segment that I like to call What Santos Said. On this segment, I will revisit an old episode. I will play an audio clip. Well, it will be an audio clip, but in this case, it will be a video clip as well. And from a previous episode, I will react to it, and then I will ask you for your opinion on it. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So I will share my screen. So let's go to. You see?
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. This was from episode 24. Where I had my guest Ketsi. This episode was called De Colores. All right, so let's play. So many times, right? How many times you've seen, diaspora, as you call them, as we know them to be, diaspora Puerto Ricans or Latinos, kind of with those, we have those pressures, but we're trying to kind of like ingratiate ourselves and adapt to American culture, and we lose sight of where we're from. So what I was trying to say there was just, we talked about diaspora, the diaspora Latinos or diaspora Puerto Ricans, whichever, in whatever the case may be, right? Just talking about how there's so many pressures to fit in, right? Because in some cases in American society, we're not American enough, but for certain Latinos, we're not Latino enough because we're maybe from here, right? We're raised here, we live here. So just some of those pressures and some of those things. What is your opinion on that, as far as how that experience?
That experience for me personally was tough when I was in high school, because I never felt like I fit in. I felt like I went to a school, there were a lot of white girls in the school, and I felt like I just felt different. I felt like I was different from them. And but at the same time, it's so confusing because you don't want to let go of your culture, right? I'm like, they don't even talk like me, like I have this Puerto Rican accent, and they have like a completely different accent, and they really weren't that welcoming. And so sometimes it makes you feel like, should I change who I am? Should I change my appearance, so that I could fit in? But that didn't feel right either. And so honestly, I always just kept to myself. I'm a super introvert. And so I think, but a lot of it had to do, because of that, and also, like, if we look at the big discussion about hair, right? And not just like for Puerto Ricans, but for Latinos in general, where we talk about pelo malo, right? And pelo
Mm-hmm.
bueno. And at that time, that those weren't things that were being talked about.
No.
So growing up, my mom was always like, oh, doing rolos in my hair and blowing out, and because you can go to school like with your hair curly, and that's the only thing that I knew. And so I didn't feel, though, in my heart, like I was like, this is not right. Like, this is not right
Mm-hmm.
that I should have to conform to this. But there was nothing I could do, because there was no social media. This wasn't a topic where everyone was feeling like we could all be ourselves. It was like, you had to conform a little bit, or you were like completely, outcasted. And it's so sad that we even had to go through that. And I definitely made it a point, when I had my daughter, to have those conversations with her and to say, your hair is beautiful, curly as it is. And to this day, she embraces her curls and her hair and doesn't feel like she has to conform, regardless in whatever situation she's in. And to me, that's how I was able to change that. And to have those conversations with my own mother at times and say, Mom, like, it's okay if you want to wash your hair and leave it curly because your hair looks beautiful like that. And
Mhm.
that's a hard conversation to have with an older woman who her whole
That's how
life.
they were brought up. Remember, that's
Exactly.
how, because that voice was not there. That
Yes.
voice, like the voice that you are right now, the voice that you represent, did not exist. And so it's up to us to change that narrative of what they say, pelo malo, pelo bueno, all that stuff. Like, it's ridiculous, right? This is no, embrace your curly hair. That's why, like, my daughter, I have a daughter and I have a son. I love my daughter's hair is super curly. I love her hair like that. Love it, love it, love it. Like, I go crazy. I said, like, I
Yes.
play with it, like it, because
That's
I
what we need.
that's
Yes.
her hair. And
Yes.
I love it like that. And I want her to feel confident and beautiful in her own hair, because
Yes.
that's the hair she was given by God. So God bless her. That's what it is. And that's how every girl, or if their hair is straight, if your hair is straight, the same thing.
Embrace
Embracing
it.
that.
Embrace it straight. But like you said, that those voices were not there at that time. So it's almost like they didn't know any better. The same way, even for, I don't want to get into all of this, but like skin color,
Yes. Well, that's a whole different kind. Listen, I want to,
we'll
yeah,
do
go
it part two. But even, the colorism that exists amongst our own people,
ahead. Hmm.
and hearing like my own families, like, if you're white Puerto Rican, you're here. If
Right,
you're
right.
like
Yeah,
like what,
yeah.
like what are you
Hmm.
even saying?
Right.
So we have come a long way, but we still have
But
work to do.
listen, you can, by all means, if you can talk about that. I'm just saying, because you're 100% right. Like,
Yeah.
that bothers me. Trust me, it does.
Yes.
'Cause you're 100% right, because even me, like, I'm fair skinned, but my family, they're rainbows. Like, I have people, like, yo tengo familia de color también. Like, mi papá trigueño. So, like, and like, so we're mixed, right? I was actually always one of the more fair skinned ones because I look like my mom. But, like, you know, but still, like, we're mixed. We have all these different, and, like, that's not brought up. That's never talked about. And, like, those are discussions that should be had, right? I'm talking about in general in this country, that the lack of representation of, and I may do something. I have something in my head to do along down the line. I wanted to do a panel with, and I might do it with Afro Latinos, and I want to talk about, and I just want Afro Latinos on the panel, and I want to talk about the lack of representation of Afro Latinos, and that's an idea that I have. I want to do it down the line.
Do
But
it. Do it. We need it. We need everyone talking about it because it's not okay. It's not okay that growing up, when I was watching the novelas with my mom, that everybody who looked like me was a maid, right? And in the movies, we are portrayed again as the maid that speaks broken English, and the guys are all, in gangs, and it's all the stereotypical Latino roles. And thankfully, yes, that has shifted somewhat, but we're still not fully there, because when I put the news on Univision or Telemundo, I don't see that many, men and women that look like me, and God forbid, darker. It's
no,
not there.
no, it's not.
And
It's not.
but that's what makes up the majority of our people.
That's
And
right.
it's not okay. It's not okay that, that me growing up, I had to feel like wow, like would I would fit in more with these Italian girls if I was a quote unquote white Puerto Rican, because that's how I was made to feel. And even again, like you said, even within your own family, people, if you're born with blue eyes and blonde hair, you're a king. You are a god,
Right.
But
Right.
if it's the opposite, no one's going around praising you.
No, they cast you aside almost. They make you look
Yes,
like, like, oh, no, ese es feo. Like, o esa
yes,
fea, es fea con pelo malo.
yes.
Right, going
O
back to
ella
pelo malo.
yeah, ella es morena, pero es linda.
Ah,
Like, what?
that's
So,
so wrong. I always
so
hated
wrong.
that
Yes,
term. Like, ella morena, pero no es fea.
right. And it's that ignorance. It's that wasn't spoken about before, but now we are, and we are having those conversations, and I think that it is making a difference, and I think that it is voices like yours, like mine. If we hear something that's not right, whether it's your family member, whoever it is, say something. And that's how we can stop these horrible terms. Like, let's put an end to all of that.
100%. I agree with you. Listen, that's what it's all about. And having these conversations, really, if we can continue to have these conversations and push it forward and evolve on these, I think that it'll go a long way in really pushing pushing it, pushing us to evolve and really bringing everything together
Yes,
and making it all better as it should be. So,
absolutely.
all right. So, any final thoughts? Talk to me about anything you may be have going on now. Anything that coming up. Go ahead. This is your
So
chance here.
right now, I'm really focusing on, like you said in the beginning of the podcast, just really showing people that you can be positive, right? That you can be kind, that you don't have to put negative energy out into social media. So my Instagram is the Latina Educator. It is not just about education. I am all about family life, my kids, a little bit of work, my students, but really being positive, really being multifaceted, showing people that we don't just have to stick to one thing, that we can do many things. And I'm continuing to learn and grow, and I just want to show other people that we can do that as well. And for the next year, I definitely want to continue to work on my blog and a couple of other little projects that I have going on as well.
All right. No, definitely. Make sure you follow the Latina. I will plug all your stuff as well. So no worries. We will definitely plug your social media. The Latina Educator, aka Miss Sandra Polanco. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I really appreciate having you, your perspective, everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Santos, for having me.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much. So I gotta say, so great perspective. I really enjoyed having her on. Sandra Polanco, really great perspective. And again, look, these are the things, these are the conversations we need to have, and we can't be afraid to have these types of conversations. And it was great having her on, hearing her perspective. We need more role models like this. She provides a great role model for not just Latinos, female, males, but really anyone coming from the inner city, anyone coming from the places we come from, who feel like they have to stay in the same position that they came from. No, it's not the case. There's room for growth. There's room for progression. There are role models who look like us and who are us and who represent us. You just have to pay attention to them, and that's what it's all about. So I want to thank my guest, the Latina Educator, Sandra Polanco. Make sure you follow her on social media. At the Latina Educator on Instagram, as well as on TikTok, the Latina Educator. Um, Thank you, guys. That was episode 28. Guys, make sure to follow me on social media, on Instagram, the Santos Thread Shop, Santos Thread Shop on Instagram, Santos Thread Shop on TikTok, the Santos Says Podcast on YouTube, and visit santos-threads.com. You already know what it is. Thank you guys as always. Don't just say what you mean or mean what you say. Say it with your chest.